Hi, I'm Luke Scherveld. Welcome to another episode of Meet the Gaffer. I had the opportunity to work on a project that covered the new buildings, workspaces, being designed and built by Google for Google. We'll roll the tape and then we'll walk through some of the setups. Use the time links in the notes if you want to skip ahead.
The one thing we know about the future is we have no idea how we're going to be working in 20 years, 10 years, even 5 years. Charleston East and Bayview represent the first time that we led the concept and construction of our own major campuses. And it's an opportunity to rethink the very idea of what an office building is and rethink what's possible for the industry. With this shape, we had people walking by and they're like, what is this? Like, they don't even know. It doesn't look like an office building, which is so fascinating because then when you come in, you have no preconceptions of how to work that comes from historic ways of working. But instead, it's like a canvas of creating new ways of being together. With these projects, we really thought about people first, using things like healthy materials and air quality. Everyone has natural light and has thermal, visual, and acoustic comfort. Down on the bottom level is really like the market. It's where we have our meeting rooms, cafes, where you can connect with your community and collaborate. And then up here, it's more quiet. You're really focused on that immediate team.
The premise around some of the team space is that there is physical collaboration, but there's enhanced virtual collaboration that's going to happen also.
This new hybrid world, work is going to change, but this building can adapt and flex to meet that.
There's a straight line from people-first design to sustainability. It's actually the largest project to ever pursue any element of the Living Building Challenge.
And it seems critical that this project isn't taking, but actually giving. There was the chance to breathe life back into the natural landscape. Not letting things like the rainwater just run away straight away, but capturing that.
The way that it is tucked into the nature is not just a scenic garden for the enjoyment of the neighbors and for the Googlers, but it is also a highly performing landscape.
This is the largest geothermal pile system in North America that allows us to eliminate natural gas for heating purposes, helping us to make the building all electric. And because we're saving a lot of water that would otherwise have gone in cooling, we're also getting water positive performance out of this campus.
There was a commitment at the highest level to making something that was regenerative design.
We brought on a very unique set of partners, both in the design as well as the build side. People who were okay with trying out things that sounded crazy.
They were chosen for a particular reason. Innovation, they understood the challenge. They were willing to try different things.
The amount of ingenuity I've seen from the construction crews, I can't even tell you all the stories. That's a new way of thinking. It's not top-down. It's actually collaborative at all levels.
Typically, you always do a full-scale mock-up as the last step before you actually build the building. In this case, we were making full-scale mock-ups before we even had a design.
To really solve for these big, hairy problems, we need to bring a diverse group of folks together, from public agencies, sustainability experts, environmental experts, who were willing to think differently with us to make this happen.
So there were things which were really at the limits of what construction would ever let you do. But the biggest one that we did make happen was the breaking down the separation between building and power generation.
And suddenly it was the photovoltaic panel itself was no longer some technical installation that you hide on the roof. It became this kind of beautiful material of the building. Every single photon is turned to good use, either for the perfect levels of daylight inside the building, and all the excess photons are converted into power.
How do we make buildings that will be vibrant decades from now?
Could we think about the design of something that connects with people's feelings? Emotion is a function.
It's not some kind of finished tombstone. It's a living, working laboratory.
Buildings that last do so not because they're perfect, but because people care about them enough to continue to change them. So that's the whole story of the building, basically. Should I erase it? Leave it? Okay.
So big picture, this was just straightforward interviews and B-roll. But the scale of the locations was impressive. We shot in 3 or 4 of these massive buildings on multiple levels and sometimes in areas under construction, which meant that logistically, it took a fair amount of planning to get everyone from one place to the other, properly escorted and all that. We had a location scout ahead of time, and then we had 4 shoot days, and then there was a drone day where they didn't need G&E. For this interview, we first shot the B-roll scene with Miss Kaufman and extras, real Googlers, and then went in tighter for the interview. For the B-roll shot, we used a 600X with a dome from the front as a fill, and then a harder 3/4 edge light, which was more like the key, in a sense. It was also my first opportunity to use the Nanlux Evoke. We used the Evoke with a 3x3 Nanlux softbox. We also had an aperture 600D with a Fresnel coming in from the top, those slats there. Not a lot came through, but it gave us a little bit of a top light. For the background, we had an 800 Jolico and a 300X in an aperture spotlight mount. The projection units were just picking up different bits in the background, like the greenery in that planter. Oh, and here's a little DMG dash making a glow on the far left light wood wall. When we came in closer for the interview, the dome would have been too frontal. So we needed something inside to wrap that harder edge light. And an aperture 300D with a spotlight mount into a 2x3 ultra bounce was just the ticket. During the B-roll sequence in that box area, you can see there's a Google Meet conversation going on. We shot the content for that monitor close by at the same time. We keyed Mr. Curry with a Nanlux Dyno 1200C and then had an aperture 60X in a small softbox for a hair light. There was also a glow through the translucent wall behind him. I think that glow came from a Felix Q5 just coming in through direct. Here where the extras come through the tunnel, we just added a harder edge light from above with, I think it was an Evoke. Here, Mr. Heatherwick is keyed with a 1200C through an 8x8 half grid and is edged with an Evoke through a Fresnel from camera left, going through a frame of softness, like 129 or something. And then there's negative. Mr. Ingalls is seated on the stairs between 2 tallish railing walls. So we had to key him high with a Nanlux 1200 Evoke and then backlit him with an 800 Joker on a pigeon plate. We added a lot of trims to that light and maybe some CTO or CTS to warm it up a bit. An 800 Jolico, you can't just dim it and change the CCT, but it's often got the output you want, so you jump through the hoops to make it happen. When Mr. Tahir wasn't walking and talking, we keyed him with a 600X into a shallow booklight. And then we did a bit with him standing outside a window that looks into the pipe room. You can see that he's keyed by an Amaran F22C. That visual didn't make it into the final. I'm not sure if the audio did. Here we're back with Ms. Kaufman as she chats with a manager in the woodshop. We keyed with the Nanlux Dyno 1200C in a DOP choice 5-foot octa and then added some ambience with a 600X into the ceiling. We also had a Lightstorm 1200D as a key side edge and a 600 Godox in a spotlight mount to add some pattern texture to the back wall. I learned that trick of adding the Godox 600 with the aperture spotlight mount from Andrew Locke. They marry up well. Here with both Mr. Ingalls and Heatherwick, we just had the 1200D through an 8x8 and then neg on the left. It was very sidey, so when we came in closer, we added some frontal bounce. Here we did another stand-up interview with Mr. Curry. It's just an aperture 1200D into a larger dome because we tried to minimize our footprint in the construction area. We also blocked a bank of windows with some negative. Then in the background, we have a subtle push from a 600 Godox. When Ms. Kaufman is talking about the roof tiles, the edge light on the tiles coming from camera left is an Evoke with a Fresnel, while the general ambience from the left is the Lightstorm 1200D into a 12x12 Ultra Bounce. The key is the Nanolux Dyno 1200C with the DOP Choice 5-foot octa. And then I think there's an 800 Jolico streaking in the background there somewhere. The portraits that play at the end of the video were not necessarily shot where the person was interviewed. When we made our way to the basement corridors of the building heated with thermo instead of gas, we were ready with either an Amaran F22C or a double Titan tube config in a Calligree air tube. Now, that's an inflatable soft tube. Here's Rick modeling the Calligree. We were pressed for time, so we weren't able to incorporate a light on a pole for the walking sequences, but we were ready. We did, however, get to use both the F22C and the double Titan config in the Calligree for Mr. Tahir's portrait. This is a portrait of Mr. Curry looking out glass windows that had the names of native birds printed on them to keep the birds from flying into the glass. We keyed with a Lightstorm 1200D and knocked out the reflection in the front with the 12x solid. We didn't shoot a lot of fat. Pretty much everything we shot looks like it made it into the finished piece. Having quality B-roll with your subjects is gold in the edit, because usually there's not enough of it to go around. Having both the Lightstorm 1200D from Aperture and the 1200 Evoke from Nanolux allowed us to either use them together or leapfrog setups so that we could keep moving and get as many shots as possible. There are subtle differences between the two, but we can discuss that in more depth another time. And it's not like we were really pushing any creative boundaries in terms of lighting, but we did our best to embrace what was already going on in these designed spaces. Add a little or take a little away as needed to help celebrate these environments with the designers who brought them to life. It was enjoyable to be part of that process. People often say they had the best crew on their job, and the same was true for this one. Hello, Jeff Nealon was the key, Rick Larson was the swing. We worked for a very pleasant DP, Peter McCullough, and direction came from the steady hand of Cheryl Isaacson. There's a link below this player where you can see the finished piece on the site of the production company across the pond. They're good people and treated us well, which is how all shoots should be, right? Duh. Hey, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Here are two short B-roll scenes that we captured when we weren't really close to much of our equipment. So we had 1 or 2 lights, and then we used some bounce materials from the location. So in this instance, it was like a rubber thing, and then here it was a white painted metal piece that I took out of the furniture there, and then smashed some light into it so that we would have enough light with that window. And then there's a F22C as her edge.